What have we gotten ourselves into on this one, Giles? I I don't really know where to begin with this topic. It's a juicy one, um, because at time of publication, most likely the Hollywood Reporter will have released a story. We should have a press release out, and the world will know about the existence of our double secret task force that we've been operating in the shadows for about the last 10 or 11 months. And they're going to talk about the work that we've been doing, at least parts of it. So this is the podcast episode where Giles and I are going to talk about what this is that we've just announced, something called AMP. Can you imagine there's an audio cliche in our acronym? But it's the Alliance for Measurement in Podcasting, and it's something we've been working very hard on for a long time, and with particular emphasis in the last year. And look, so much of the industry chatter has been around measurement in this thing that we call podcast, whatever that is. What is it? What do we do with it? And how do we think about it now that video is a really key part of it? Most people love podcasts, and those that don't, just they don't necessarily listen, and they usually say that they should when they're asked about it. So it's not that they don't like it, but this is a medium that most people consume and most people really feel a strong connection to. But it has suffered and stagnated over the last few decades as it's kind of stumbled its way through pretty significant growth and gone from an unreported, unknown thing to a multi-billion-dollar industry. But we're finding bottlenecks in its growth potential and realizing its potential. And a lot of that comes down to the way that it defines itself, the way
Yeah,
that,
just one comment
yeah.
on that comes to mind as you're saying that. Like, I think a lot of people maybe don't even know if they're listening to a podcast, and maybe they're among the now less than 50% of people who say like they don't listen monthly, but actually maybe they're listening to a podcast on YouTube and they're just not realizing it's a podcast or not calling it a podcast,
Because
which
they
is
can see it.
yeah.
Because they can see it. Yeah. So there's this big question about what it even is. And I think we've explored that on this show pretty extensively. But with AMP, we've really tried to do something different. And look, this is the Media Roundtable. I'm Dan Granger. I'm the CEO at Oxford Road. And we're about this business. And we really lean into this stuff through the lens of what does it mean for brands and how should brands live and behave to be successful in this ecosystem where things are kind of podcast and podcast adjacent. It's kind of where we live. We touch on the creator world. We touch on the audio world. But so much of this conversation is really around this idea of podcasting and what it is. And Giles, you've obviously been a partner for many years. We've been working together for about 8 years. We've been through a lot. Giles has been consigliere to me at a number of key moments during our growth story, but spends most of his time doing what we kind of use an umbrella term of strategy work. But there are a lot of ways to think about Giles's involvement in the industry and in our business. And one of those is that he's been very vocal and involved in the way that we approach measurement, attribution. Somebody described him as the technical conscience of our industry. And I don't know what to say about that. And maybe you don't either, but I will
I'd
say
prefer
that,
not to comment.
yeah, but, one of my favorite things is when Giles rants about something because there's usually a reason for it. And he cares about the nuance and the precision of how we talk about things. And I think what we've learned is this stuff can err on the side of technical. It can get a little wonky, but it really makes a big impact on the smoothness of the work that we do as an organization and as an industry. And when we're not thoughtful technically, and when we rush into, trying to solve industry problems without being coordinated between the stakeholders, it really creates a lot of problems. And that's the reason I think we convened the task force as we did. Now, just setting the table a little bit. So basically, we have our CAO summit that we've been doing we did it for the last 3 years in the summer, where we get about 75 leading advertisers together somewhere in LA. We've been doing it at Terranea as of last year. And what we did a year ago is we convened a group. We invited 12 individuals who represented 12 organizations that we thought were the most influential organizations, whether that's because of them playing a part in the distribution of content and really being involved on the technical side, or being significant buyers of advertising, or whether they are in the measurement side of the business or the content side of the business as a publisher. We tried to get the most influential cross section together to say, what are the biggest challenges that the industry is facing, and how can we solve them as a group? And Giles, I'd love to hear you just provide a little color commentary around why you believe we formed the AMP task force, and what its intended purpose is.
Well, one thing that I just want to highlight or clarify, just because, as you just said, like the details matter to me. You mentioned we had 12 individuals representing different companies, with significant involvement in the industry. Perhaps this doesn't need saying here, but the companies themselves are not being represented on this task force. Like, I cannot speak for what Oxford Road believes just on my own, and nor could somebody from some other company. So these are 12 industry experts with a lot of experience, a lot of gravitas, a lot of knowledge of their area of the industry, and they are all commenting and advising on the basis of their own personal experience. Now, with that said, I think the key point is the one you made, which I'd like to underscore, is, there's a real cross-section of representation here. So this group is different from those other types of groups in the sense of it's a broader group with not solely kind of representing technical expertise and not solely with technical goals. Although obviously there is some technical expertise on the group, but the levels varied. The other thing that I would just mention is, there have been efforts similar to what AMP has been trying to do, which is to propose different ways we can create more standardization in the industry. For example, NPR's RAD effort, I think it was back in 2018, was a similarly assembled group of experts who had proposed ways to measure actual listens instead of downloads, but it required a lot of engineering lift from the podcast players, the very end of the chain, or even the podcast hosting platforms potentially. And there was not a lot of incentive for those organizations to actually implement this. And so without full and wide industry support, no matter how good a proposal it was, it never really got the traction that it perhaps deserved, because it didn't have that widespread support. And also, I think is really important to call out the involvement of the advertisers here. Like, the advertisers are the people who are bringing money to the ecosystem. And, we had 3 advertisers involved in the task force who spent significantly in podcasting, and bringing their voice to the table, their voice to the conversation, I think materially changes, what we're able to do, and the sort of the impact that we're able to bring to the industry. So those are my high level comments.
Helpful. And I think we should get a little bit into what were some of the strengths of the task force as well as its limitations. And even I think it's for anybody that's curious to know how we structured this thing, I think some of the methods of the charter for how we function were important too. For example, because some of our content delved into the technical, we allowed for task force members to bring another member of their organization who may kind of major in whatever that topic was so we could have more voices. We also did expert sessions to bring in outside voices who may know something that the task force doesn't, or may have a strong point of view or a significant place in the marketplace that we should be considering. So how we did it, I think, is part of the conversation today. But what did we do exactly, and what were our goals? Like, I want to just, set more of the foundation with you here. And start with, like, what were the key questions we were trying to solve, right? Like, we really started with 3 questions. And, maybe we can just talk about that for a little while, because I think that, this came out of a felt pain that was happening across stakeholder groups. It's not like it's just the advertisers that were agitated, and it's not like it's just the publishers, right? Or the creators knew there was a gap. The players know that there's a gap. And when everybody's speaking different languages about what we're actually trading in here, I think it's created a lot of friction. That I think the assumption going into this is that we know that the lack of consistency in what we're even talking about and the things that we're measuring is costing everyone money. And while the things that are being done in disparate ways through different organizations might serve the organization in certain ways, the fact that there's different ways that it's being applied makes it harder for the buyer, and we're inevitably frustrating our customers and holding back money that could be reaching all parties. So we wanted to find solutions that would allow all boats to rise by having a little bit of healthy tension between the various stakeholder groups, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side or the creator side or the publisher side. We really wanted to facilitate a healthy tension so that we could create recommendations and solutions that may not be the best for any individual participant, but would be acceptable to most of them, right? I think that was the spirit of what we tried to do. But in terms of the actual questions that we tried to answer, do you mind just sharing a little bit of color on some of those, and maybe we can unpack them as we go through?
Well, the first one we already touched on, which is the question of what even a podcast is, in 2025, 26. And it used to be fairly clear and fairly obvious that it was something you got through an RSS feed and listened to on, Apple Podcasts and then Spotify or your player of choice. But with YouTube entering the space, things became far more complicated. And especially now in 2026 with, Netflix even entering the space and, podcasts really making it to, the living room and sort of, it's probably too dramatic to say they're replacing late night TV, but there's certainly been some talk.
But they're
in the industry.
Replacing late night TV. Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'll save the dramatic statements for you. And so you yourself had done a lot of work on this with, talking to many experts in the industry, original founders of the industry through to the sort of present day talent. You've talked with many members of the public. You've, done an enormous amount of research on this, and I think it's probably best that I hand over to you to tell us a bit more about that before we get on to the other topic.
So the question of what is a podcast, I like everything you just said, Giles, is right. Like, we came into this strange time in 2024, 2025, where the ascension of video became a much bigger topic. Video in podcasting isn't necessarily a new thing. Apple used to have videos in the podcast section. It's been available for a long time, but it really wasn't the dominant way that people were consuming it. And so I think what changed was the true volume of video consumption of things that have been classified as podcasts, and podcasts had kind of been sitting under the idea, or it had been sitting under the bucket of audio for a long time. And it's funny, I talked to one of a friend of the show who's a wizard this morning, Steve Goldstein. He teaches the class on podcasting at NYU and has contributed a lot, I think, to the discourse around the industry as it evolves. And he was describing an event that he was at where there were a lot of big agency buyers, a lot of brand buyers. Everybody loves podcasts, and he was saying how everybody wanted to buy podcasts. Everybody was motivated to be a part of the channel. But what one of them says is basically, hey, Bob buys audio and Sally buys video, and they talk to each other once every 6 weeks. So good fucking luck with that.
It's out of verbatim.
Yeah, that's, well, as it was told to me. So the point is, when people are confused about what they're buying, it shuts down the flow of buying. There is less transaction. When things are hard on the customer, wallets close. And how much, to what extent is that opportunity cost? We've done math to say it's at least $1 billion. You could probably make arguments that are much greater than that, but it is theoretical because we're talking about opportunity cost more than we're talking about something you can really pinpoint. So the point is, I think we all know that it's an expensive problem, and I think we all have better things to do in a day than worry about chasing definitions around. Consumers are fine. They'll call things what they'll call them. But for those of us that buy and sell and trade in this stuff or manufacture it or distribute it, if you are part of that ecosystem, you really do need some clarity here. And the audio versus video thing is big. There's other tensions that I think, have had to work through. The questions of RSS, the questions of, open platforms versus closed platforms, and the original spirit of podcasting. We had to work through all of these things in this process, even before we started the task force, to try to land on a definition. But the main point of it is, I think there are real business consequences here when people can't pin what they're buying, and the buy can, a podcast is something everybody wants, but it's a jump ball between your digital buyers, your offline buyers, your influencer buyers, your programmatic buyers, and
your audio and video buyers.
The audio and video buyers. So you look at the fact that buying organizations, whether it's a brand managing agencies or agencies working on half of brands, they all have departments with areas of specialty, and they don't know where to put this fucking thing. Sorry. So I think that was like part 1 of 3, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about part 2.
So part 2 was the first of 2 measurement questions that we wanted to explore. And specifically, it was looking at, how and whether it's possible and how to sort of provide some reconciliation across all of the different metrics that are out there in the industry. So in the legacy side, you've got RSS downloads. We know that many of those downloads are never even listened to. So they're not really a true metric of, content exposure or advertising message exposure in and of themselves, which I think is another reason some of those big brand buyers are hesitant about coming into the industry. Because with, I think, every other medium that, you can buy out there, that you're actually at least buying, an impression that actually, is served. So you have the RSS, legacy RSS, and then you have views for YouTube video views. So that's a very different type of metric where the content actually, is being consumed in a different way. It certainly seems like, but certainly like those are videos that are being played and at least, started. And YouTube have, their own proprietary, very different set of checks and algorithms to ensure that, the viewer is, a real person, and they have all their own standards to ensure quality in those ways that are very different from the RSS standards. And then Spotify have had metrics, both plays and streams, I think, that they have developed over the past couple of years, at least around the time we were starting to think about this issue and start thinking about the task force. And so it's a real hodgepodge of metrics, and again, it raises barriers for buyers. It undermines confidence for buyers, particularly serious buyers with big budgets who are used to, really sort of standardized media planning approaches, standardized tools, expensive, often, out of the box media planning tools that podcasts just, it sort of just sits aside from all the rest of those channels. And yes, you're totally right. There's an issue about, well, who should be buying this, and like, how's it even going to happen, or does it just end up getting ignored because it's still such a small piece of some of those huge agency budgets. But there's also the issue of, well, how do I plan for this? How do I measure this? How do I know I'm getting a certain amount of reach or frequency out of this that complements the rest of my media mix? And all of these questions are ones that historically the industry just hasn't answered well.
What is your favorite podcast other than the Media Roundtable? What is it? Joe Rogan, Call Her Daddy, Mel Robbins, Crime Junkie, Amy Poehler, Smartless, Pivot. What are you into? It's such an interesting dinner table topic to ask people. You learn a lot, and people are so passionate about this medium. They're so passionate about it. And where do you listen? Where do you watch? Is it YouTube? Is it Apple? Is it Spotify? You are in the center of what we do as an organization. That is our business. We are Oxford Road, and we help some of the leading brands in the world be successful advertising in these channels. We're the largest specialist that exists. We buy the most ads in this channel. So we are actually powering this industry. We buy over $500 million of ads per year for wonderful brands like Shopify, Wayfair, DraftKings, Masterclass, Chime, Quince, AG1, Mint Mobile. We're interrupting all your favorite podcasts, including not just the usual suspects, but there are thousands in the long tail that are great niche shows with really loyal audiences. And what happens is when you advertise there, the host really only gets to pick one in your category. And so if you're the first there, you can kind of lock up that relationship, that annuity, and be recommended to those audiences for years. So it's a powerful space. And it's one where we have the privilege of leading right now. We've got lots of great ways to de-risk our clients' campaigns, like our Orbit data set that's getting close to $2 billion of performance data. So we know what's going to work in advance. We also have Audiolytics, which are our proprietary ad grading system to make sure every word counts and is always getting optimized, and then de-risked through our brand safety taxonomy as well, to make sure we watch out for your brand values. If you want to win in this channel, and you've got something to say, you got a product worth talking about, and you want to get into this trust economy, and you're serious about it, you really want to be a part of it over the long haul, we'd love to talk to you. OxfordRoad.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter if you like free stuff. It's called The Influencer, and it's free. We also have a lot of good thought pieces if you want to learn at OxfordRoad.com. That is OxfordRoad.com. I'll kind of try to echo back to you what I think we're talking about with this pillar. So the first question was like, what's a podcast? And the second question is really like, what is a listen, or, what is an impression or exposure? And a few things that I really stood out to me. One is, it's not unique for something like a download to be a metric that is acceptable for media buying and selling, when it is not based on actual exposure, but rather an opportunity for exposure. And we talked a lot about this, right? We looked at other mediums, billboards, magazines, places that will charge you based on subscription or how many magazines were printed, even though they may be in a dentist office and maybe thrown in the garbage and nobody actually knows anything, right? You get an estimate. You pay for the billboard based on how many cars drive by it. Are they looking at that, or are they looking at their speedometer or their phone or maybe the road? I don't like that metric as a buyer, but it's acceptable. It's a unit of measurement that's at least been consistent. But the challenge with three leading players, three leading points of distribution, all having different methods, where one is selling something that is a lot closer to exposure and debatable versus one that is an opportunity for exposure. And we blend these things and they all get added up to a projection of how many times an ad was consumed, whether it's audio or video. Just having the different places that people can consume it, counting it in different ways, means that the buyer is buying a bag of three different units and being basically told that they are a single unit and not really appreciating many times what they're actually made of. There's a lot of swill. There's a lot of, they're cutting this with a lot of different products that the consumer may not be aware of. And as a consumer, I think we want to know what we're buying. I think we want to have confidence in that. And so I think that's a part of it. But let me just draw it out a little bit further about so who cares? Why does it really matter? Well, everything in podcasting that is ad supported, okay, we can kind of exclude maybe somebody that distributes and sells subscriptions on a Patreon. But as far as most of the ecosystem that is ad supported, we're buying and selling off of CPMs. And your CPM is how everybody gets paid. It's how the creator gets paid, even when they have a minimum guarantee that they're negotiating with the publisher. They're doing the Rogan, Call Her Daddy, Smartless, whatever. They're all doing it based on a projection of how many people are listening or consuming the show. Well, if those numbers are actually half of what they say or double what they say, that matters a lot to them. It matters for the buyer. It matters for the seller. It matters for the advertiser who's buying the unit, because they have to buy off of a CPM. Now, look, we work with a lot of performance brands, and a lot of performance brands really built the place, and we're willing to hold their noses for the first 10 to 20 years of this industry and say, it doesn't really matter if the download is a legitimate metric, because ultimately we're going to test it. We see there's other performance marketers on the show, and if it works, we'll continue to pay more. But even with the performance marketer, their first buy is usually predicated on a CPM. And if that CPM is predicated on a mixed bag of garbage, it's not necessarily a high quality way to be trading. And we want to be trading in a way that has more transparency between buyer and seller, manufacturer, creator. Everybody needs better, more reliable metrics. And the last harm in this problem not getting solved, I would say, is for the creators, who oftentimes end up chasing a metric, and they will manufacture their show to please the algorithms sometimes. And if what you're chasing is the YouTube algorithm, you're going to do something one way. If you're chasing the Spotify or the YouTube algorithm, you might do it differently. Having a single way that this stuff is measured across platforms hopefully allows for people to pursue the thing that matters most, which is audience engagement. Is the audience actually paying attention? Are they focused during the ads versus doing other things, passively listening, not listening or viewing at all? And the closer you get to the whole, the better the value is. And we want creators chasing that and not chasing algorithms, which is sort of what I think has made us insane as a society. But that's maybe
or chasing downloads. I mean, there have been a few unfavorable news stories for the industry over the years that I've been here, where podcasters or podcasting companies are sort of paying for downloads that are really very unengaged traffic, if they're even real humans. And I'm sure it still goes on today. And these are shows without a good quality audience, really, or a much lower audience than you would typically expect based on their download numbers. And moving away from that type of mindset and structure in the industry, I think, can only serve everyone. It serves advertisers better because they know what they're getting, they know what they're dealing with. But ultimately, I think it serves the content creators and the publishers as well, because it means they have to be in it for the content, and care about the content, care about the audience, and not just be in it to, find ways to juice the numbers as much as possible.
Giles, let's talk about the third question.
Yeah.
The third question.
So
what is the third question?
It's another measurement issue, but whereas the number 2 was about measuring you used the word listens, first of all, and obviously that's the whole problem, is that they're not just listens anymore. So we called those exposure metrics. That can cover being exposed through listening or exposed through viewing or anything else. So number 2 was about exposure metrics. Number 3 was about, I think it's easiest to think of it about ROI metrics. So how do we truly measure the effectiveness of podcasting in an era where a lot of the technology that has historically provided ROI accountability or attribution for podcasting is no longer applicable? And of course, I'm primarily talking about pixel-based measurement there, which has been, increasingly widespread in the industry since it arrived probably Q4 2018 or 2019. And there's many brands, many of our clients who rely on pixel-based measurement to show their advertising ROI. And of course, it's something that's widely established in digital marketing and is expected, by growth managers, growth VPs who are using that same type of technology to grow and invest in their other channels. With YouTube coming into the space, obviously YouTube's measurement historically has been very much managed inside its own garden, and there's not been a possibility to place those same type of measurement pixels on the increasing number of impressions that are happening on YouTube. And there have also been some question marks about the ability to pixel videos generally in the same way that we are with audio. So our goal here was really to propose a standard way of approaching attribution that could work across audio and video and could be acceptable to all parties in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, this has been such a topic forever. I mean, the frickin' Wanamaker quote, right? It's 100 plus years old, which half of my ads are working and all that. It's actually not a new problem, but it's I think the sad thing is, like so many other things, we imagined a future in a digital world where these things would get better and we'd get more clarity, right? And it turns out it's just like pandemonium where we'd be better going back to the mail order catalogs and sending coupons.
Easy to measure,
right?
those.
I mean, creative testing would be more simple in our channel, but like we used to be in the promo code and the vanity URL business, and sadly we often still are. We've talked a lot about survey methodology, but not everybody's e-commerce, and as this industry wants to scale, there needs to be some universal tracking, or it will be limited by its measurement capabilities. Other channels will steal credit with mixed media models. The time shift of consumption is a problem for measurement in this channel, and you can't throw a vanity URL on everything. Most people don't use them anyway. So we've been through that. We've talked through all that, and what was really sad is I think a lot of the industry started lining up behind these pixels a few years ago, and for a moment in time it seemed like that was not the dominant issue on every conversation. But I will say in my career, I don't know if I've ever spent more time on a topic, whether it's creative media selection, media changes, particular shows and personalities, brand safety. Nothing has ever taken so much time or occupied so much of an advertiser's attention as this problem of attribution. it is stunning how much of our whole world depends on it. And so yeah, so the three questions really are: one, what is a podcast? Two, what is a listen, or what is an impression? And three, did the ad work? And we have assembled what I believe is the most consequential cross section of the industry today. And I was really grateful for the kind of the types of companies that were willing to go on record for this and to be involved in this. Like I said, we had 12 seats. We held a few of them for specific groups to be represented, and 9 of the participants have gone on record. You can use your imagination on the others. But we're dealing with companies that have to go through a lot to say anything publicly. And I think going back to what you said earlier, Giles, like, we set this up with a charter. We got feedback on everything we created, including the charter. Our charter had a few requirements in it, and I won't read the whole charter, but one of them was that we had to make sure that because individual members of our task force did not have autonomy on behalf of their organization. Some of the groups we're dealing with employ thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe more. And, no individual is going to join a task force with, and be able to wave a wand on behalf of their organization. But they can represent the interests of that organization in the conversation, and they can vote, and they can abstain, and they can propose better ways or better motions to the task force. And so what we really tried to do was make sure that we got the most impactful groups represented, which I think we achieved. And I think we set up an infrastructure whereby we really could come together on not a question of what is the best outcome for my company, but what is the best outcome for the industry, in a way that hopefully, turns into, I think our ambition for this is that we see market adoption behind the recommendations of the task force. Go ahead and chime in. I know you got something on this.
No, I don't. I mean, the point about market adoption obviously is the most important thing, and I think, it goes back to the point about having such a wide cross section there and having the advertisers there. I think that something like this type of approach hasn't been tried before, to my knowledge, and so I'm optimistic that we perhaps can have success, driving adoption here where, others have not been able to.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to, we're given the industry a blueprint. We're advocating, or we will have given the industry a blueprint. What's being announced today is just simply that we exist. And like I said, we're going to provide some clarity in June about the findings of the task force and some of that market guidance, some of that implementation guidance. But really, the mother load comes out in July, late July, probably on the 23rd, around our CAO summit. We will provide the marketplace with a document that details everything the task force has agreed. And agreement doesn't mean it was unanimous. There are some abstentions, and there may or may not be 1 or 2 votes against. Actually, don't know where we'll land there, but everything will have passed and be ready to be announced for that. So you'll be able to see. And then it's our job to advocate with the trade organizations that, provide some form of governance. And I think we hope that we can use our influence in the marketplace and encourage others to use theirs, whether on the task force or not, for the adoption of these things. And there's really not, I would say one thing is, there hasn't been a lot of pride of authorship in that this isn't anybody's specific agenda. I wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily create the findings of the task force to represent what's in the best interest of Oxford Road exclusively, because that's not going to take. What we need is something that Oxford Road can put up with, that our clients can put up with, that YouTube and Spotify and Apple can put up with, that the leading podcasters and publishers can all put up with. What can we accept? And if we can, and so that's been the aim of the group, is to find something that is mutually acceptable to all stakeholders. And so there may be better outcomes for an individual organization, but I would challenge the industry to find better recommendations for the whole industry, and to not just think about their own objectives. And it's a test of this industry, because either we will choose to continue to go our own way and force the buyers and sellers to have to play hopscotch around all the unnecessary deficiencies and sand traps that it takes to do business here, or they'll try to align and say, okay, let's just make it easier on the customer. And so that's what we've been advocating. And I think it's going to be really exciting when we're able to give you more detail about what's actually been produced. We have been able to announce most of the participants, though not all. And you know what, Giles? Since we're on record, I'm going to announce some of the folks that have been at the table with us in this task force today, just to share with you some of the weight behind it. We have had Anna Hartman and Jordan Newman from Spotify. We've had Brittany Clevenger from BetterHelp. We've got Mike Janigan, and we've had other representation from DraftKings. We have folks from UTA, including Rebecca Steinberg and Oren Rosenbaum. We have Flight Story, which is Stephen Bartlett's group, represented by Christiana Brenton. We have Libsyn being represented through Anthony Savelli. We have Podscribe being represented through Pete Bersinger. And we have a few folks that we're not able to mention. And that's okay. I mean, the fact that we got 9 to go on record is a big deal. And of course, Oxford Road had a seat as well, which was kind of fun because Giles and I basically would hand off to each other. One of us would play facilitator. One of us plays facilitator in this process, while the other one is playing task force member, because we've had the pleasure of facilitating and convening the task force, which is cool. But also we have our own viewpoints to bring to it, and we kind of have to navigate that in doing both. And I think it's been a fun dance as we've been doing it. Here's the call to action on all this. You can learn about the effort. And like I said, we won't be posting the findings of the task force, the things we voted on that passed, that we have clear recommendations on. We won't be doing that yet. But if you want to just get involved, learn more, follow us, you're going to go to ampaccords.com. AMP Accords, that is AMPACCORDS.com. Giles, why would it be called AMP Accords?
Because we reached a satisfying mutual accord to recommend to the industry.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And I guess worth repeating, we have no power. We do not have authority to make any organization do anything. We all, govern our own organizations or parts of them. And so this really is going to, I think, come down to how much people really want alignment and see the problem with the fragmentation in measurement. And I think the best thing that we're able to do is to provide a path and to advocate for that path, and hope that people participate. And so we invite you to be a part of that. You know, the podcast industry, I've said it before, I'll keep saying it. I believe it is the greatest canvas in media for the free and open exchange of ideas. I believe that it is different and unique and better than a lot of the more algorithmically driven channels that are based on short form comment or content that is made designed to give you spikes in short form, but not depth and not relationship and not two sides of a conversation. Not every podcast achieves it, but I really believe that the theater of the mind and the long form content is more a partner in people's growth and a type of entertainment that maybe has a better consequence than some of what has replaced more common forms of media in the last decade or so. And I think it's important. And so I think that right now you've got a creator economy that some people are calling $1 trillion industry. Podcast is really only representing about a percentage of that from what's measurable. Of course, you can't really measure it precisely because there's no definition. But we believe that it's not only good for the industry to have some standards. We believe that it's good for culture. It's good for people. It's good for all of us. And so I hope that you'll take the time to familiarize yourself with these three questions, and you'll help us keep thinking through this and thinking through how do we make a better marketplace out of it. And you can do that by going to ampaccords.com. That is AMP Accords. Remember, Alliance for Measurement and Podcasting. That's AMP. ampaccords.com. And stick around. Giles, any final comments before I bring us home?
Just that you really read the CDA and the URL like a true pro.
Thank
and
you
I
so
tip
much.
my hat to you for that.
Thank you.
Still
Thank
got
you.
that.
I've been absorbing this for so long. If I can't read a call to action.
I think I would just also say, I think, you summed it up really nicely, and we've got things to propose to the industry. We, want to hear people's thoughts about it. We encourage you to sort of continue to join us in thought partnership on this, but also, hopefully for many people, they can sort of see the wisdom in it and see the potential, not just, for standardizing the metrics, but sort of creating more traction for the industry to grow. And, we really look forward to seeing, what type of engagement we get and to evolving this together. So it's great to be involved with.
Well, and Giles, I'll say a lot of people to thank who have really been putting in a lot of extra work on top of day jobs that this was never written into their job description. Of course, Olivia's done a fantastic job supporting us and supporting this effort from the beginning. Molly's put a lot in. Tucker's put a lot in. And you've put a lot in. You have agonized all along the way with me, and I think we'll still need to agonize a few months more to bring this to market. But thank you, and I love to work on this kind of stuff with you. If I got to be stuck in something that's this technical, but also this ambitious, like you're just a great partner, and I think you've really helped lead this task force, and consequently, I think we're doing our part for the industry in a really consequential way. So thanks for your leadership and partnership in this effort, and thank you to all of the people I listed because they gave and continue to give their time and their energy and internal advocacy and approvals so that we could even say their names. Big thanks to all them. Let me bring us home. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road. If you can believe it, we want you to succeed in podcasting and maybe a little audio and creator media. And we want you to use your influence for good. We really believe that as members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that go beyond entertainment, but to really edify and build people up. and to build bridges across our differences and preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. You know what I was talking about earlier. If you're a marketer and you want to align your brand values with business outcomes that you need to hit, reach out to our agency. It's what we do. Go to oxfordroad.com, subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It's called The Influencer. And we are always looking for your feedback through info@mediaroundtable.com. I will see that. I might tell Giles about it. I might not. And check out Ad Infinitum, of course, hosted by Stu Redwine. It's all about creative in this space. And again, ampaccords.com. Thank you again to Giles, as well as to Haley, Bianca, Rocio, Kyle, Ezra, Callan, Paulina, Everett, Neil, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.